June 22, 2009. 72 hours before the world would change forever. Inside a rented mansion in Holmby Hills, Los Angeles, Michael Jackson was living through days that would later be examined in courtrooms, analyzed by medical experts, and questioned by millions. What really happened during those final 3 days? What did the people closest to him observe, and what signs, if any, suggested the tragedy that was about to unfold? In our previous episode, we explored Michael Jackson's final rehearsal on June 23, 2009. We saw a performer who, despite everything, still possessed extraordinary talent and dedication. The rehearsal ended with plans moving forward for the London shows, with anticipation building for what promised to be the greatest comeback in entertainment history. But between that final rehearsal and the morning of June 25, a complex and troubling story was unfolding behind the gates of 100 North Carolwood Drive. The mansion where Jackson lived during the final months of his life was not his own. According to property records, it was a rental, a temporary residence. While he prepared for the This Is It tour, the house was large and luxurious, but those who worked there later testified that it had an atmosphere unlike a typical celebrity home. Staff members described a residence that felt more like a medical facility than a family dwelling, with Dr. Conrad Murray maintaining a significant presence and medical equipment visible in Jackson's bedroom. June 22, 2009, fell on a Monday. According to trial testimony, Jackson had no scheduled rehearsals that day. This was unusual, given the intense preparation schedule for the London shows, which were set to begin in just 3 weeks. Witnesses reported that Jackson spent much of the day at the mansion. His personal chef, Kai Chase, testified about preparing meals during this period, though she also noted that Jackson's eating habits were irregular and concerning. According to her testimony, he often requested specific foods, but would eat very little. The relationship between Michael Jackson and Dr. Conrad Murray is central to understanding these final days. Murray, a cardiologist, had been hired by AEG Live in May 2009 to serve as Jackson's personal physician for the tour. According to contract documents presented at trial, Murray was to be paid $150,000 per month. However, trial testimony revealed that the contract was never fully executed, raising questions about the exact nature of Murray's role and obligations during this period. What was happening medically during these 72 hours remains a subject of intense scrutiny. According to testimony from the involuntary manslaughter trial, Murray was administering propofol to Jackson to help him sleep. Propofol is a powerful anesthetic, typically used in hospital settings under careful monitoring. Medical experts who testified at trial emphasized that using propofol in a home setting without proper equipment and personnel represented a significant deviation from medical standards. Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011 for his role in Jackson's death. June 23 brought the final rehearsal we examined in our previous episode, but what happened after Jackson returned home that evening adds crucial context to the larger story. According to testimony, Murray was present at the mansion that night, as he had been on many previous nights. The routine, as described by witnesses and Murray's own statements, involved administering various medications, including propofol, to help Jackson sleep. This pattern had reportedly been ongoing for weeks. Trial records indicate that Jackson's insomnia was severe and long-standing. Biographers have documented his struggles with sleep throughout his adult life, challenges that appeared to intensify under the pressure of tour preparation. However, the solution being employed, according to medical testimony, was extraordinarily dangerous. Propofol is not a sleep medication. It induces unconsciousness, which is fundamentally different from natural sleep. Medical experts testified that regular propofol use could not provide the restorative sleep the body requires. If you're trying to understand the complex factors that contributed to this tragedy, subscribe to this channel. We're examining every element with care, always grounded in documented testimony and established facts, never speculation or sensationalism. June 24, 2009, arrived with plans for another rehearsal session. According to production schedules presented at trial, this was supposed to be a significant rehearsal day. However, Testimony from crew members indicated that there were concerns about Jackson's availability and condition. Some witnesses reported that he seemed to be struggling with the demanding schedule, while others noted that when he was present and engaged, his talent remained undeniable. The picture that emerged from trial testimony was complex: a gifted artist under immense pressure, dealing with physical challenges, yet still committed to his craft. The business pressures during this period were substantial. According to documents from the AEG Live wrongful death lawsuit, the production company had invested over $30 million in the This Is It tour. By late June, emails presented at trial showed that executives were concerned about rehearsal attendance, production delays, and the financial implications of any postponement. While there is no evidence that anyone intended harm, the trial revealed a system where commercial pressures were significant and the stakes were extraordinarily high. Staff at the Carolwood mansion later provided crucial testimony about the atmosphere during these final days. According to their accounts, the household had an unusual structure. Dr. Murray often spent nights at the residence, staying in Egson's bedroom. Security personnel testified about the doctor's comings and goings, noting that he would sometimes leave the property in the morning to attend to other obligations, then return in the evening. The children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, were also in the home, cared for by nannies, and when he was able, by their father. Kai Chase, the personal chef, testified about June 24 in particular detail. According to her account, she prepared meals as usual, though Jackson's eating remained sporadic. She described the household as having a certain routine, with the children's activities, meal times, and Jackson's own schedule creating a rhythm to the days. However, she also testified about an undercurrent of concern, a sense that something was not quite right, though she could not pinpoint exactly what. The evening of June 24 and moving into the early morning hours of June 25 would prove to be the most critical period. According to Murray's own testimony and statements to police, he was with Jackson throughout the night. The doctor described administering various sedatives and, eventually, propofol in an attempt to help Jackson sleep. Medical experts who reviewed the timeline testified that the sequence and combination of medications represented dangerous polypharmacy. Trial testimony established that propofol was administered in the early morning hours of June 25. According to Murray's account, Jackson finally fell asleep and Murray left the room briefly to use the bathroom and phone calls. When he returned, according to his testimony, Jackson was not breathing. The exact timeline has been scrutinized extensively. Phone records presented at trial showed Murray making calls during critical minutes, raising questions about the level of monitoring he was providing. What happened next has been documented through emergency call records and testimony. At 12:21 p.m. on June 25, 2009, a call to 911 was made the Carolwood Drive residence. The caller was not Murray, but a member of Jackson's security team. According to the recording, which was played at trial, there was confusion about the exact address and an urgent need for medical assistance. The call lasted several minutes, with the operator providing CPR instructions while emergency responders were dispatched. The delay in calling 911 became a significant point of examination during the trial. Medical experts testified that in a cardiac emergency, every minute matters critically. According to testimony, Murray claimed he had been performing CPR, but he did not immediately call 911. The reasons for this delay were debated extensively. Some suggested Murray was attempting to handle the situation himself. Others, including prosecutors, argued that the delay represented a failure to prioritize the patient's welfare. Paramedics arrived at the mansion at approximately 12:26 p.m. According to their testimony, they found Michael Jackson on a bed, with Murray present. The paramedics described a chaotic scene and A8, who showed no signs of life. They testified that Murray told them he had found Jackson in this condition only moments before, though subsequent timeline reconstruction suggested this account was not accurate. The paramedics began advanced life support measures, attempting to revive Jackson while preparing for transport to the hospital. Share this episode with anyone interested in understanding the complex truth behind one of music's greatest tragedies. These facts matter because they reveal how systems can fail and how precious life can be lost even when talent and potential are riddled. The decision to transport Jackson to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center was made, though some paramedics later testified that they believed resuscitation efforts might be futile. However, given the patient's identity and the circumstances, transport was initiated. Murray accompanied Jackson in the ambulance. According to paramedic testimony, Murray was asked what medications the patient had been given, and his responses were incomplete. He did not immediately mention propofol, a fact that became significant during the trial. At UCLA Medical Center, emergency room doctors continued resuscitation attempts. According to hospital staff testimony, they worked on Jackson for more than an hour, employing every available intervention. However, medical records showed that Jackson had been without adequate oxygen for an extended period before reaching the hospital. The damage was irreversible. At 2:26 p.m. on June 25, 2009, Michael Jackson was pronounced dead. The cause, according to the coroner's report, was acute propofol intoxication. The 72 hours before that moment tell a story of missed opportunities, dangerous medical practices, and a system that failed to protect an extraordinary artist. According to trial testimony and medical expert analysis, Jackson's death was preventable. Had propofol not been used in a home setting, had proper monitoring been in place, had 911 been called immediately when problems arose, the outcome could have been different. These are not speculations, but conclusions drawn from medical evidence presented in court. The aftermath of Jackson's death brought investigations, trials, and global mourning. Dr. Conrad Murray was charged with involuntary manslaughter. The trial, which took place in 2011, presented extensive evidence about those final days and hours. Murray was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison, though he served approximately 2 years before release. The conviction established that Murray's treatment of Jackson represented criminal negligence, that his actions deviated from acceptable medical standards in ways that directly contributed to Jackson's death. But the trial also revealed broader questions about the This Is It tour production. The AEG Live wrongful death lawsuit, brought by Jackson's family, examined whether the concert promoter bore responsibility for hiring Murray and for pressures that may have contributed to the tragedy. While AEG was ultimately found not liable, the trial exposed documents and testimony suggesting a production environment where commercial considerations were paramount and where concerns about Jackson's health may not have received adequate attention. Looking back at those 72 hours from June 22 to June 25, 2009, certain facts stand clear. Michael Jackson was under immense pressure to prepare for 50 concerts. He was struggling with severe insomnia. He was receiving dangerous medications in a home setting from a doctor who lacked proper equipment and who made critical errors in judgment and action. The staff around him noticed concerning signs but were not in positions to intervene in medical decisions. The production company had significant financial stakes in the tour moving forward, and ultimately, a series of failures, medical and systemic, converged in tragedy. The personal toll on those who were there cannot be understated. Jackson's children lost their father. His family lost a son and brother. Staff members who had cared about him were left with trauma and guilt about whether they could have done something differently. The fans who had loved his music for decades were devastated, and the entertainment industry was forced to confront uncomfortable questions about how artists are treated, how much pressure is acceptable, and what safeguards should exist. These 72 hours also remind us that behind the headlines and the icon was a human being. Michael Jackson was dealing with physical pain, sleep deprivation, and psychological stress. He was a father trying to care for his children while preparing for the most demanding performance schedule of his career. He was an artist who had given the world extraordinary music and dance, but who was struggling in ways that those around him may not have fully understood. His humanity, his vulnerability, and his mortality became painfully evident in those final days. The lessons from this period extend beyond Michael Jackson's story. According to healthcare experts who have studied the case, it highlights the dangers of celebrity medicine, where normal medical standards may be compromised by wealth, fame, and patient demands. It raises questions about tour production practices and whether adequate safeguards exist to protect artist welfare. And it emphasizes the critical importance of proper medical protocols, especially when dealing with powerful medications in non-hospital settings. As we examine these 72 hours, we must balance multiple truths. Dr. Murray was convicted of criminal negligence, and his actions were central to Jackson's death. However, according to trial testimony, Jackson Hyssop had sought propofol and had dealt with addiction issues in the past. The production pressures were real and documented, even if legal liability was not established. The system around Jackson included many people, some of whom had concerns but lacked the power or knowledge to intervene effectively. The tragedy was both individual and systemic. The final hours of June 24, moving into June 25, represent the culmination of longer-term patterns and problems. According to medical testimony, the regular use of propofol had been ongoing. The sleep deprivation had been building. The tour pressure had been mounting. These 72 hours were not isolated but were part of a larger story of an artist, pushed to his limits, receiving dangerous medical treatment, surrounded by a system that prioritized the show over his well-being. In examining what happened during those days, we see both the fragility of life and the weight of responsibility. Murray's responsibility was medical and legal, established through conviction. Others around Jackson had different roles and different depth of awareness. Some had concerns, but did not know how to act. Some were focused on production goals. Some were simply trying to do their jobs in a difficult situation. The complexity does not excuse failures, but does provide context for understanding how tragedy can occur even when many people are involved. Michael Jackson's death on June 25, 2009, was a preventable tragedy. That is the conclusion drawn from trial testimony, medical expert analysis, and investigative reporting. The 70 hours before that moment contained warning signs, dangerous practices, and missed opportunities. They also contained a brilliant artist still trying to create, a father caring for his children, and human beings making decisions under pressure. All of these elements were real, and all contributed to the outcome. As we close this examination of those final 72 hours, we're left with both answers and questions. We know what medications were given and when. We know the timeline of the final morning. We know the failures that occurred. But we're also left wondering about the what-ifs. What if different medical choices had been made? What if the tour had been postponed? What if the systems around Jackson had functioned differently? These questions have no answers, but they remind us that tragedy often hinges on moments and decisions that seem small at the time. In our next episode, we'll examine the immediate aftermath of June 25, 2009, and the global response to Michael Jackson's death. How did the world react? What happened to This Is It tour? How did the investigation unfold? And what does Jackson's death mean for his legacy and for discussions about artist welfare in the entertainment industry? The story continues with grief, investigation, and an attempt to understand not just how the king of pop died, but what his life and death mean for all of us.